Lil Shaddam is told no lie in that clip, and I'm looking forward to Take for 99 later on in the show to give y'all another one of those sound bites where I spit the truth, because that's what I do. But anyway, we are going to move into the NFL here, and that was a perfect transition to what we are going to talk about. Some teams made bad moves, some teams made good moves. We are going to give our top 3 most improved teams this offseason. And fellas, I'm not sure how y'all constructed y'all list, but I'm talking about draft. I am talking about free agency. I am talking about combining those two things. Who on paper has gotten significantly better? And fellas, you know, we could get 3 teams, but we can go around and give one. We don't have to do it in order. If we have an order, fine, that's cool as well. But we are each going to take turns giving out a team until we get to 3. And Zach, if you want to do the honors to kick us off first, the mic is yours.
For sure. Yeah, guys, I'll give you guys my top winner of the offseason. This is by no means a hot take. I'd be pretty surprised if this team isn't on your guys' board as well. But I'm going to go to the first picture in our graphic there, and you got to go with the Chicago Bears as my first most improved team this offseason. And I really like what Ryan Poles did. We know that this was a huge offseason in Chicago with the #1 pick. And really, the Bears improving this offseason goes back to last offseason and that big trade they made with Carolina, getting their #1 pick. It turned out that Carolina was the worst team in the NFL this past year, and that got Caleb Williams to Chicago. But that's not the only move they made. Of course, they traded for Keenan Allen from the Chargers. Of course, they drafted Rome Odunze from Washington with their first-round pick, and they signed DeAndre Swift at running back from Philadelphia as well. They bring in Gerald Everett from the Chargers. I believe I said this on the show a couple weeks ago. I'll say it again. I cannot remember a better situation that a #1 overall pick quarterback will go into than Caleb Williams going to Chicago. This is not Joe Burrow going to Cincinnati. This is not Trevor Lawrence going to Jacksonville. This is not Andrew Luck going to Indianapolis when the entire franchise was relying on those guys to turn them around. Nah, this is a great situation for a #1 pick. Chicago won 7 games a year ago, and it's going to be a massive disappointment if they don't improve that win total. And one other thing I'll say too, guys, I think the hiring of Shane Waldron at offensive coordinator is another reason why I feel good about this Bears selection as my #1 most improved team, because I'm not going to lie to you guys. If Luke Getsy was the Bears offensive coordinator, I wouldn't feel as confident. I still didn't even love the fact that they decided to bring back Matt Eberflus, but he's a defensive guy. The defense was much improved last year when he decided to take reins and start calling defensive plays. So they had to change something up at coaching. They bring in a guy from Sean McVay's tree from Seattle and Shane Waldron, a guy that really fixed Geno Smith and started to turn his career around in Seattle. So I love the Shane Waldron hired offensive coordinator. And also they locked up Jalen Johnson, their franchise corner. They were able to agree to terms with him on a brand new deal. So honestly, I said going into the offseason too that I'm not really someone that trusts Ryan Poles. I think his work and his tenure in Chicago up to this point has been subpar at best. Of course, the Chase Claypool trade, he didn't do a great job surrounding Justin Fields with the proper weapons, giving him a chance to succeed, but he didn't draft Justin Fields. He just drafted Caleb Williams, his guy, and I thought he gave him a great situation. So for me, this was a really a thought. The #1 most improved team for me this offseason is the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where Zach left off. We might as well stay here because that's my #1 too. And Zach, I'm glad you did the honors for me by naming all the moves that they made this offseason. I got to do that. I keep this really, really short here. I think for me, a lot of people wondered why they brought back Matt Eberflus, right? But I think when you look at how this roster is constructed, top to bottom, offense and defense, like it's really hard for him to mess this up and fail. You know, like he could kind of sit back and ride shotgun and allow his players to make plays. That's how well-ly crafted this roster is. Now, I understand he's a defensive guy. No problem, right? Ron Rivera was a defensive guy. He got Cam to win an MVP, right? Bill Belichick was a defensive guy. Tom Brady's the GOAT. He coached the GOAT, right? Sean McDermott, defensive guy. Well, Josh Allen took a leap and is known as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I'm not worried about him being a defensive guy. He can't really mess this up. This roster is put together nicely for a guy like Caleb Williams coming into arguably the greatest situation of all time. And I think it's going to be hard for Caleb as well to fail. Like he's under a lot of pressure because there's no reason why the Bears should not be at least contending for a division crown right off the gate with the amount of talent that this team have. But it's all going to come down to defensively. And if they could build upon what they did last year, a lot of people forget that their defense improved last year towards the back end of the season. They made Jared Goff look like a scared cat in there in that pocket. They actually picked him off a couple times, multiple times. That's the guy they got to go up twice against. So if they could build upon their defensive success last year, I think the offense is fine. That's the X factor. I like the Bears #1 as well.
Yeah, my team that I feel like improved a lot. I only got them 1 through 3. I was just picking a team. Is the New York Jets. They revamped their offensive line completely. And it's a complete overhaul of what we just saw last year, especially when a team that was worse in offense in probably NFL history damn near last season. And now they revamped the offensive line. They were able to add an offensive lineman in a draft. Also, I added a receiver to increase the receiver depth. On top of also bringing in 2 running backs who are good at pass blocking, something the Jets hasn't had in quite some time. And when we're talking about just being able to revamp what that offense look like, we're going to see a completely different look. Not because Aaron Rodgers is there, but because the protection will be there for him, allowing not only the pass to come into fruition, but also the running plays to go into deeper runs, except for those 2 outside of those 2 to 3 yard carries that we were seeing a lot of last season. Like I said, if we're talking about the top, I don't have like a top team because I'm high on a lot of different teams. But right now, and just remember, just off the strength of what I've seen teams, what a team did to kind of change 180 completely on what the offense looked like. That New York Jets offensive line completely changed from what it appeared to look like last year.
Before let me jump in here.
Of course, you got it. You know, you're the Jets fan in here. I forgot. My fault.
It's all good. I actually had the Jets on my list as well.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
They were another team I had here. I think it's been a great offseason so far. I like the fact that Joe Douglas has really used premium assets on just fixing the offensive line. We know that they went out and got Tyron Smith, who is by far and away the best free agent left tackle, protecting Aaron Rodgers' blindside. But as good of a player as he is, we know he has some injury concerns. He's most likely going to miss a handful of games. So they also drafted Olu Fashanu from Penn State, left tackle, with that number 10 pick. So they used a top 10 pick on a left tackle, and they also signed the best tackle available in free agency. And they brought in a couple guys from the Ravens, which were a pretty good offensive line last year, Simpson and former Jet Morgan Moses. So the offensive line is completely revamped. And then also, I like the draft pick of Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. I think that the Jets really needed some better receiver depth. I like the Mike Williams signing as well, but a trio of Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, and this kid Corley, I think that really works. And Aaron Rodgers, we know the whole Jets season is dependent on him. If he's not good, then there's no point. This season isn't going to work. But I still think that as long as you keep him upright, he's a guy that is capable of making other players around him better. I like the fact that they decided to pass on Brock Bowers and draft an offensive lineman, really focus on, keeping Rodgers upright and just giving him full trust that, okay, he can make the surrounding pieces around him better. And also, I like the draft pick of Jordan Travis as well. We know that Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old. He's not going to be here for the long term. So you might as well start grooming a guy that might have a chance of taking his place one day. And I really liked what I saw from Jordan Travis before he got hurt last year. If he stays healthy, I think Florida State makes the college football playoffs. So I think that the Jets had one of the better drafts. I think the Jets overall had one of the better off seasons, and I think they're fully deserving for a spot in this most improved team list as well.
Zay, before you go with your next team, I have a question that I want to throw both of y'all way. Do y'all even think that the Jets had a better overall offseason than the other New York team, the Giants, right? Because don't get me wrong, the Giants are not in my 2 teams, right? They're not in my 3 teams, right? I'm just throwing that as an example because you can make the argument, at least from my perspective, that I think I would have the Giants ahead on a expanded list. I would have them ahead of the Jets, not by a lot, where it's like I'm hating. It's like right next to each other. But I think when you look at the Giants moves and what they did, I'm adding on Brian Burns, to go alongside Kayvon Thibodeau and also getting a couple guards, and then you got the draft, right? I didn't really look extensively at their draft moves. I'm talking about free agency, but you could we could look at that as well.
Mhm.
And the Malik Nabers wide receiver that really is going to transform their wide receiving room. Would you have the Giants ahead? Clearly not, because you have the Jets. But is there a case to be made that the Giants should be ahead of the Jets?
And the reason why I don't believe that the Giants have a case is because they didn't improve. They didn't make any changes to their weakness, which is our offensive line. Essentially, when you added in a Malik Nabers, they got rid of Saquon Barkley, so you replaced the playmaker with a playmaker essentially. But then you didn't add no one to the offensive line. In terms of Brian Burns, they added a strong piece of defense to already what their strength was, which was their defensive line and their defense in itself. The defense was their bread and butter last year for the Giants. It was one of their positive looks of their season that last year was their defense. And they're adding Brian Burns. It doesn't escape the fact that their offensive line is still is depleted. It needs more bodies up there to protect the quarterback and protect what they're trying to do, which is run the football and create play action. And I don't think they added it to that, and in free agency or the draft. So I think that's why I didn't put the Giants up there, because they didn't address one of their main issues, which was offensive line.
So it's funny, Zay, you call the Giants' biggest weakness their offensive line. I think their biggest weakness is quarterback, and that's still a major, major question. And that's why I didn't love the Malik Nabers trade. You know, the Giants, they were trying to trade up for Drake May, right? There were reports going out there that they offered their first this year and next year to try to move up to that number 3 pick and draft Drake May. So that clearly shows they have no belief in Daniel Jones going forward. And I don't really think there's a quarterback in next year's class that if you bottom out this year for, that's can't miss. So like, you're going to draft Shador Sanders. Okay, maybe like that would be a pretty risky proposition. And I still don't love the decision of letting Saquon Barkley go. I think if I were the Giants and if I were Brian Dable, I would have drafted a quarterback in this year's draft, brought back Saquon Barkley, and give ownership a reason to keep you, because I think we all agree that the New York Giants are going to be very good this year. I think at most they'll win 6-7 games. That would be a successful season. And I think with Bill Belichick looming, really trying to get back into coaching, if you're Brian Dable, you need to find a reason to give ownership to and tell them like, look, like I'm still Brian Dable. I'm still that dude. And I'm just very unimpressed by this roster. I think the Brian Burns trade was a good one. You know, that's one that will make them better, no doubt.
Yeah, that was the best pass rush in the draft. I mean, excuse me, in free agency.
I just don't know. As good of a move as it was, though, I don't necessarily think it changes their outlook or ceiling in any way this season, because the quarterback position is still a major question mark. And even with Malik Nabers, I don't see how that's getting fixed anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, I just think you can make the argument that you got one of the best wide receivers in the draft, and you got the best pass rush in free agency, and you also added a couple offensive linemen to the weakness that Zay was talking about in free agency. So, you know, it's a debatable topic for me, but Zay, I'll leave it with you to
one
give
last point on that, though, Will. I just think that before those moves were made, I thought the Giants were going to be a 5-win team, and after those moves are made, I still think they're going to be.
So what you think about the Jets? You think they're going to the Super Bowl? Because you're dreaming, you know. Like,
no, I mean, no, but I think they're going to win the AFC East.
I don't know about that, but you know,
like I think they'll be a much improved team.
Go ahead, Zay.
The team that I was very impressed with during their offseason acquisition acquired players not only from free agency and the draft was the Texans. You bring in Stephon Diggs, you bring in Joe Mixon. They brought in C.J. Henderson. They brought in bevy of players. Daniel Hunter. I think I said it right. Daniel Hunter. Sorry. Yeah, Daniel Hunter. They brought back Dalton Schultz. And then on the draft, they brought in Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. They bring in Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. They improve not only their what was already good in their secondary, but they also bring in some offensive linemen. They brought in a tight end I like, Cade Stover, that I think he could be something in this league if given opportunities. I think he'll share reps with Dalton Schultz depending on what happens in training camp. But I think the Texans are primed to try to make some noise in that AFC, especially bringing in Stephon Diggs with Tank Dell and Nico Collins both coming back from their injuries. I don't know if they're going to play right away. I don't know what their status is per se, but I know when all three touch the field simultaneously, that our pass offense is going to be electric to the point where you're going to allow Joe Mixon to get another 1,000-yard season and dominate the rushing game. It's going to be very difficult to stop this team that has three damn near number one receivers, 3 wide receiver ones, and then you got a running back who's so electric on the field that he could run past your defensive line. So I think for me, the Texans had one of the more dynamic off seasons out of all the teams this year.
Before I go, Zach, do you have the Texans on your list by any chance?
I do not.
Okay, I wanted to make sure, so we could keep it where. All right, I'm gonna go with my team, and feel free, we could free fall if we have to after. The next team I'm gonna go with, and this is no particular order. I'm doing this right now. I will let y'all know at the end of it. We can cook up a graphic, and I'll show you my order. But I'm gonna go with the Chargers, as Jim Harbaugh is calling my phone right now. Yes, Jim Harbaugh. I'm just about to go there. I'm going with the Chargers as my team. One of the most improved teams this offseason. And I understand what a lot of people are going to think. Lil, didn't they lose? Like Keenan Allen, didn't they lose? Mike Williams, didn't they lose? Eckler? Well, let's talk about it. Eckler should have been gone. He looked like a slow beetle to me last year. Mike Williams can never stay on the field. Ironically, he went to a team that y'all picked as one of the winners, the Jets. So we'll see how, now you know how I feel about that. And then Keenan Allen, Keenan Allen is Keenan Allen, but he's still older. He's getting in a danger zone of, all right, guys that you kind of want to stay away from unless we have a rookie quarterback whom could use a guy like Keenan Allen, which ironically is the team that I picked number one in Caleb Williams, right? Now, it all makes sense. Now, when you talk about the Chargers and their moves specifically, let's start off with Jim Harbaugh, the hire of the offseason. A guy that's going to bring toughness. So even though you lose a lot of finesse, you're going to gain a lot of toughness, and I think their draft moves and free agent moves is a microcosm of the infrastructure that Jim Harbaugh is trying to build. You're talking about the free agency moves. We can start off there. They added Will Dissly, who's going to be a run blocking tight end. This is not your Kyle Pitts. This is not your Gronkowski or your Travis Kelce. He's not going to put up numbers like that, but he's going to block and open up the lanes for his running back, okay? You got J.K. Dobbins, who you brought in. I understand this guy's a walking injury, but at the same time, when this guy's on the field, he can play. That's one thing for sure. You got Gus Edwards to be exact. It gives them a 1-2 punch at the position, right? You look at the draft moves, and this is where it takes the cake for me. You draft a guy like Joe Alt, and I understand there's going to be a lot of differences in opinion when it comes to if they should have drafted the wide receiver over the lineman, but I look at it from a perspective, right? You got Joe Alt on the right side, you got Rashawn Slater on the left, and now you complete in depth. You are robbing the defensive players, okay? Because they can't get to the quarterback. And it's like, that's how you build the ground game. That's how you build Jim Harbaugh, I call him Harbaugh, his personal prototypical roster that he had in San Fran, where he dominated on the O-line, that he had in Stanford when the O-line was dominant, that he had in Michigan when the O-line was dominant, and they played good defense. Listen, I understand we're going to look at these moves that they lost and be like, they should be a loser. They should be in the losing category. But I don't look at it like that. And one more thing, the wide receiver, Loud McConkey. This is a guy who could work the underneath. He gives Justin Herbert a primary slot option. I was pulling for them to sign what's the dude that used to play on the Raiders, slot guy, Hunter Renfrow. I was like, yo, sign that guy. And they did even better. I think they got a guy who they could literally grow into being one of those dudes. So I think they are committed to Justin Herbert. They're trying to build a roster where he doesn't have to do much. I hope they allow him to cook. He has the strongest arm in the NFL, one of the strongest arms in the NFL. And the only way, like, I really think anybody could rebut my take is in this way. Jim Harbaugh is doing what worked for him before. Is it going to work now? It's not 1999 anymore. Clearly, you're watching the show. And sometimes you do have to adapt in your ways of building. And I think, Jim Harbaugh, he predicates on stability and continuity. Is that going to affect the Chargers? Is that magic going to run out? I'm not sure. But on paper, they're one of my winners.
All right, guys, I might as well give my final winner, and then we'll exchange takes on each other's. My final winner, I'm going to go with the guy in the middle of that graphic. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles as my final winner. I think Howie Roseman did a great job of really just looking at his team's weaknesses and saying, all right, we got to improve that, and that's exactly what he did. We know what the problem with the Philadelphia Eagles were last year. It was the secondary. So what does he do? He uses his first 2 draft picks on players in the secondary, bringing in Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. I think he's going to be an absolute dog. The last time I was on this show, my take for 99 was that the two best defensive players in this draft were going to be Latu, who ended up going to Indy, and Mitchell, who ended up going to the Eagles. I think he's going to be a big-time player. And he also drafted Cooper DeJean from Iowa, a guy, people are calling him Jackie Robinson, is the first white corner drafted into the NFL in 20 years. I think he's going to be a big-time player as well. And he locked up A.J. Brown. There were some questions of, is A.J. going to be happy in Philadelphia? Is this a long-term fit? Oh, by the way, he also locked up Devontae Smith. So both those guys are going to be in Philadelphia long-term. Of course, he brings in Saquon Barkley, taking him from a division rival. I also like in the coaching aspect as well. They bring in Vic Fangio as their new defensive coordinator. I think the Eagles are going to be one of the best defenses in the league. He brings in Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator, who, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty underwhelmed with what he did with the Chargers, but I think with this personnel in Philadelphia, he should be a big upgrade over Brian Johnson. And then they also brought in Bryce Huff from the Jets, who's one of the best natural pass rushers in the league. So I think the Eagles had a monster offseason. I think they're the team to beat in the NFC East right now. I think you could even make the case that they're one of the best teams in the NFC overall. And I'm expecting a monster bounce-back season from Philadelphia. They are my other winner.
Zay, do you have the Eagles in your list by any chance?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna go with my last one. Right. And I think that was a good pick too. I was listening to you talk, Zach. I'm like, oh God, yeah, you're right about that. Like they should be in the top 5 at least. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, my last one, I'm gonna stay in the state and I'm gonna go with the Steelers. I understand a lot of people wouldn't expect me to go here. Zay had a take for 99 a couple shows ago. I think it was the last show where he said they were gonna win 12 games. Mm-hmm. Now I thought that was a horrible take. I'm not gonna go that far. I don't think this is gonna translate to 12 wins. However, I am a type of guy that I give credit where credit is due. I do not hide credit. That's why I got good credit. Okay. I thought they had a phenomenal offseason, especially primarily the draft that makes up a lot of it. But then you're taking free agency as well. Look, they bolstered the needs that they needed to. We all know with the Steelers, it was 2 major issues: offensive line, quarterback room. They bolstered both of those positions, right? They drafted. Now, Zach, I'm gonna need you to translate for me because you're the translator. You're my translator here. Troy Fatnu, Zach Frazier. Okay, in the first and second round, they drafted those guys there. Thank you, Zach. They drafted those guys there to bolster that offensive line. And it's no secret what the Steelers are going to do offensively with Arthur Smith. They're going to run the football, okay, constantly. They're going to run the football. And they're going to run the football. And they're going to run the football. And they're going to run the football. They're going to springboard the play action. Okay. Then they're going to run the football. Then they're going to run the football with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, and then they're going to play defense. They're going to get an interception. Then they're going to run the football. And then they're going to run the football. You get the point. They're going to run the football. And their quarterback room, if we could talk about that real quickly here. Look, I'm not losing my head. I don't think nobody should. That Wilson is coming to town. Okay, he's not the Wilson of old. Justin Fields, we can see if he sees the field. I think there's a good chance he'll see the field. I don't think Wilson's going to last the whole year. But then again, it's the Steelers we talking about here that sleep at the wheel and wait to the last minute to make changes. But we could all agree that Wilson and Fields is an upgrade over Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. And that's it. And one more point. Defensively, they got that dude from the Ravens, Patrick Queen. Stealing that player from your division foe is a big flex, and that's why that team is next for me.
Well, I'll throw a question right back at you. I agree overall. I thought they had a pretty good offseason, but when I'm looking at this roster, though, the one thing I think they're really missing is a wide receiver. Yeah, because they traded Deontay Johnson. And I like the draft pick of Roman Wilson from Michigan. I think he could be a good player. But, there were some rumors. Are the Steelers going to go after Brandon Ayuk? Are they going to go after Deebo Samuel? Maybe even a guy like Cortland Sutton. How would a move like that, change your mindset at all? Would that move have them grow even more on your list? And how do you feel about that position of need at wide receiver?
Honestly, even if they would have made a move for a wide receiver, which they still can, right? It could be a pending topic right now. Still, I kind of hinted at it during my take. They're going to run the football. They're going to run the football. So even if they got a wide receiver, Like with Arithmetic Smith, we know this from the Falcons, right? Where they had Kyle Pitts, they had Drake London, they had all those guys, all those weapons, those shiny toys. But guess what? They ran the football. They ran the football and they ran the football. So I'm expecting the same thing. You know, if you're trying to build a team, and I know where you're trying to build, and I know what you're trying to do, and you have a draft in a free agency where you're catering to what you want to do, now the only thing left to do is see if you do it successfully or not. I could respect that. And they're going to stick to what they're going to stick to. They operate in 1999. And even though it's not 1999 anymore, you can never go wrong drafting linemen. Like that's a must. That's going to continue to be the theme of how you win football games in the modern NFL as well, is you build from the inside out. You build in the trenches. And I respect the Steelers trenches game.
Yeah, that's why I think Debo, right? Like, how would that fit look in that run-heavy offense, Debo and Arthur Smith?
Well, I think it works perfectly. I think that's what Arthur Smith wants. He wants to utilize the running back. If Debo can play both, then that's like Arthur Smith's fantasy world right there. You got a guy who can play running back and receiver. But now
looking at it right now, you know who else they signed, which is an interesting move from Atlanta, Cordero Patterson. So,
oh yeah, they did sign him. That's that gadget guy.
Yep,
can do a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had the Steelers as my last team that improved. The offensive line, they added not only, like Lil said, the tackle, a center. They added a guard. They added another, I believe, like another tackle. They added like 4 different linemen that I believe could start right away, because that Steelers offense has been absolutely just abysmal the last couple of years. I think you just bring in some fresh bodies, guys who don't have wear and tear, guys who are physical, and the big boys up front. You just put them in there. Just put them in the starting line, the starting rotation, depth chart on that offensive line. Hopefully they outplay a lot of these veterans, but you can make the argument that Steelers offensive line has been beat up because they're running the ball nonstop, and those guys are just not capable of upholding just protection at all, for let alone the quarterback or the running back. I think added in Russell Wilson is great, because they're probably the best talent at quarterback they've had in a very long time, and I think that's going to be play wonders for Arthur Smith, because now he gets a veteran quarterback who's been there, who's been in a system that's been in a run-heavy system. He's been in a system that's been throw-heavy. And I think you put him in that situation, now Arthur Smith gets to play the Russell Wilson strengths, and Russell Wilson allows Arthur Smith to do what he does best, which is run and play action. The same thing that allowed Ryan Tannehill to have that second chance at a NFL career. And I think Roman Wilson is gonna turn a lot of heads. I think he's actually gonna be really good, one of the better pros in this NFL. I think his footwork is phenomenal. And I think he already knows how to play in the system that is run heavy as well. So I think you added like a lot of complementary pieces to this offense that I think will work wonders, because it's not going to be very egotistical. Yeah, George Pickens is going to want his touches. We know how his ego is and how outspoken he can be if he's not getting the ball enough. But that rest of the team, I think, is going to be very complementary to what that offense is trying to do, which would win in the trenches and then win football games by keeping that time of possession on their hands.
Yeah, time of possession is the key for the Steelers. That's what they like to do. Any last remarks before we head to our final segment of today's show?
Yeah, well, I have one question, other one I'll throw at you with your Chargers pick. It's interesting because obviously the hire of Jim Harbaugh was a great move, a move they had to make. And I think long-term, of course, that's going to age to be a pretty good one. But what are your expectations for the Chargers this season? And what would you consider them to be a successful season for them to be? Because obviously when we're doing this exercise, like all of our criteria is going to be different. How I did mine was I thought to myself, like, what moves do I think are going to help each team like improve when it comes to their win total this season? And to be honest, like I would have liked to see them take Malik Nabers with that number 5 pick. I think it was a fine, solid pick. I think it's a low floor pick. Like I think he'll turn out to be a pretty good player. But I think if they would have drafted Nabers, like there's a chance Justin Herbert and Nabers could have turned into the next Burrow and Chase. So what do you think? What are your expectations for the Chargers this season, and what would you consider a successful season for them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? Because you highlighted or hinted at it that, the way how we did our rankings was a little bit different. I didn't really explain how I did mine. So I would like to get into that as I answer your question, because I think for me, when I was looking at it, I'm just looking at it on paper, right? Because I think there's a lot of football left. There's no football left, right? This is the offseason. So there's a lot of moves that could be made in between now. Guys can get hurt. It's so hard to predict so ahead of time based on win total. That's why I'm just looking at it like, yo, draft, free agency, which team got better? You know, simple as that on paper. Now, as far as how it will pan out, I think we'll get our answers about that soon. I think for me, what's my expectations with the Chargers this upcoming season is the same as it is every year. You know, it's time that somebody step up to the plate and defeat the Kansas City Chiefs. And in their words, the Kansas City Thieves, because they've been stealing this division every single year since Patrick Mahomes has been drafted and playing. So I think it's the same protocol. You know, yeah, sometimes you got to subtract because you're over the cap and you're over the tax. But at the end of the day, you still have to compete. You still got an expensive quarterback in its prime. You still got to win games. You still got to win playoff games. And I think Justin Herbert, as good as he is, I mean, there's a lot to be desired about when it comes to his playoff resume. Jim Harbaugh, we didn't hire him just for the look of it, just for him to say these quirky things at the presser. Like, we didn't hire him to go sightseeing. We hire him to win football games, because everywhere he goes, instantly, automatically, he turns around the program or the franchise. So I'm expecting the same thing here with the Chargers. Now, as far as wins and how many wins that could be, I'm just saying beat the Chiefs. It's time.
Do you think that's realistic, though, if Quentin Johnston's your number one receiver?
That's the biggest X factor out of anything we're talking about right now when it comes to the Chargers, is the evolution of Quentin Johnston. If he can take another leap, listen, it's not like we are making it seem too, and I get it, like he had a terrible year last year, but he catches at least 3 of those passes. We're looking at his season totally different. And I'm talking about wide open passes. If he catches that pass against the Packers and he wins the game in the fourth quarter, we're like, yo, that dude was clutch. He just made a bomb play and he won the game. Like, that one play in particular might change the way how we view that guy. Just that one play. So if he could just catch the ball, something that should be automatic, something that he should be practicing since grade school and should definitely be practicing right now. If he could take another leap, that's the difference here. That's the X factor of how far the Chargers are going to go, because they invested so highly in him.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.